This whole idea of creating a sort of a special zone, of course, crosses over to sort of discussions of space, and you suddenly now have a space in which laws operate differently, and you have to be watchful for certain things. What I'm going to do today is really something that Bremer has already sort of shown you with the slides, and that's really to show what outside of the riots, outside of even this term, Little India, the space that has been enclosed really stands up to something, a sort of special place in Singapore history that eventually, if you set up these kinds of rules, will sort of change its character a little bit. So I'll just take you a little bit back in time and start with Tiger, not Tiger beer. And really, this whole area was kind of infested with tigers. Here is an account by Henry Keppel, who gave his name to the harbour. The district of Serangoon appears to be tigers' favourite prowling ground. In April last year, one of them put up to flight a party of Malays who had work. Before they could go clear of the jungle, the tiger, advanced in years, remarkable, sprung on them and selecting the fattest. When the first shock of the fight was over, they turned on the tiger and pursuing them with the parangs made him drop his prey, but not until the poor man was in the agonies of death. The same tiger, however, determined not to be disappointed of his meal that night carry off a Chinaman at a short distance from the scene of the morning's exploits. In the course of the following month, at the same place, 2 Chinamen employed in the sawing timber were carried out. And this really sort of is an account of a developing Singapore. And if you look at this is a 1911 map of Singapore. What had happened, of course, was the British had created the colonial district in the south.
Could you speak a little louder? Your voice isn't carrying to the back.
All right. Sorry about that. So here you see is that better? Here you see the 4 major roads that lead out, of which Serangoon Road was the very first one planned. Already in 1828, there was a plan showing that there is a road that will be cutting Cross Island. Of course, Cross Island meant that it would be reaching out to the northern and other parts of Singapore, and the reason was clear, because there were unlicensed farms, Gambia farms, and so on and so forth in the exteriors. But in this case, for Serangoon, there was a large settlement of at the end of Serangoon River. So that road subsequently, after 1828, started to be built. Next, please. And of course, we go back to animals again. I mean, the terms Serangong, Rangong being I've sort of traced it to a lesser adjutant, and that really tells you about the character of the place. It's a bird that will be found in mainly swampy areas. Sa, of course, is one, and Sarangon, the term sort of stuck, and that's the sort of seemingly the origins of the name. And of course, you can see that a lot of this, again, prior to sort of a large human settlement, you would still get a lot of cattle grazing in the areas with rivers, but also with the sort of sort of a race course being established in that area, you also get horses and so on and so forth, and that's where sort of different communities. So the Bawanese, for example, they were trained to be sort of riders and so on and so forth. So next, please. So if you now look at what the colonials had in mind, this is what Fernewell calls a plural society, in which different groups, right, will be segmented in a different space, and they of course would serve the colonial enterprise. They would not meet socially and so on and so forth, but only at the marketplace, and in the early sort of a scheme, you can see this is just a plan, so you can see that they already have established a Chinese area. The Indian areas, which were supposed to be on the sort of northern part, close to the Singapore River, was subsequently, of course, then transferred to other parts of the island. And of course, the Europeans would then straddle, in in the midst of all of this. Yes, please. But there are problems with Furnival's idea of sort of these kinds of very clear-cut ethnic enclaves. The first, of course, is that while we are sort of aware of enclaves that are easily defined, like Chinese, Malays, Indians, of course, they work in very special ways too. I mean, so say for example, a special group of people. So there are things like sub-enclaves. So some street workers, for example, would form another sort of area within that area that we call sort of a Cantonese enclave, which if you can look at it, actually it's already quite complex. You do have Cantonese, Teochew, Hokkiens settling in what we call the sort of Chinese enclaves, and I'm sure with the rest of the enclaves as well. Next, please. For the so-called Indian enclave itself, of course, as you can see on the map, they soon moved to sort of other parts of Singapore, and the Serangoon area and the Serangoon Road area and the Sembawang Road area sort of became sort of areas where they would settle. Next. At the same time, of course, there were quite a large number of Indian convicts that were brought in. These would be they would sort of be employed, right, in sort of a public service, right? I.e., they would be employed by the Public Works Department, and they would be building the roads. And what I'm actually really showing here is that there is a lot of contribution by these convicts actually to build up the early infrastructure of Singapore. That's what a friend is arguing, and really sort of perhaps this is the first major instance of the use of foreign labor in building up Singapore. Next, please. Then, of course, what I'm going to show you are sort of what we sort of roughly know as different kind of trades that brought Indian labor in. This is the Dobies, the laundrymen. Next. And then also you have with the cattle and with dairy farms and so on and so forth, you do have sort of a large spreads, either in Bukit Timah or at the end of Congo. There would be sort of dairy farms that would be managed by Indian communities. And then if you look at where the official temples are, these green dots represent the sort of the temples are. Then there is also the dotted line represents the old railway line in Singapore. You can see that the railway sort of line also brought in, right, because they will be used by the Malayan Railway Authority to sort of maintain the line, right, and quite a number of them settled in Singapore after that. And along the railway line, of course, it's actually for every 4 kilometers you will get a shrine, because that's the area of the sort of jurisdiction. Next. And then a friend, Nick Kosher, has also written about how they have sort of specific groups will also get into specific trades. Like we found out that the sort of Kacang Puteh sellers would mainly come from just various families that would be running its business. So this space of Little India, and already you can see in this very early 1870s map that it had never been called Little India, because past the sort of Singapore riverside and past the Middle Road area, the whole area is always been very, very mixed. It's never been sort of called one ethnic community or the other. And if there was a name that could be found in old maps, it would be Kampong Kapor. As Maura explained, this was the lime makers, right? And that area, being a swampy area and with good soil, it was a good area to make bricks. Right? So you can have a lot of brick making, but you also need the lime for the mortar. So, and of course, interestingly, the name is in Malay, Kampong Kapor. So Kapor means lime, and so that part, the beginning part of Serangoon Road, as far as I can see in old maps, had always been called Kampong Kapor. Or if there are sort of particular references to it, of course, it would be just called Serangoon Road. Just right. And of course, the Rochor Canal formed a kind of marker of town, and once you pass through, once you cross Rochor Canal, right, you're sort of within town itself. So that's Rochor Canal then sort of became a big marker for the residents in and out of town. Here you see the brick kilns themselves, just north of the river system. But alongside that, you also have agricultural experimentation, as we mentioned, and since the 1930s, something that a lot of people don't realize is that Singapore became the center for the trade of rattan, and Singapore would not be producing it themselves, but they will be importing it from neighboring countries and sort of make into furniture and export it. And of course, that actually explains why there are roads called Rotan Lane, and even maybe Tekka could be a sort of variation of the kind of vines. We know that there are a lot of plantations. There are pineapple plantations, and then on the right hand side you see what the brick kilns would have looked like, sort of a very simple sheds at that time. Next, please. And then if you also look at sort of building plans of the time, who were the people building it, you can see that really there were sort of different groups as well. I mean, you had Hindu temple being built right in front of a mosque, right? And then of course further down the road you had a hospital, right? A paupers hospital being built. So you had different groups of different ethnicities starting to build up all over sort of the Serangoon Road area. Besides the cattle sheds, besides the sort of the race course. So we fast forward to the 80s, and here you can really see that in the 1980s, when conservation was being focused on in Singapore, the shophouse zones, right, these constitute quite a big part of what that special zone is. Then would then sort of be started to conserve, and then of course you get new trades, like backpackers hotels, that moving in. And if you look at the area, it will still be comprising mainly of shophouses, and of course that had sort of replaced the sort of earlier. There are no swamps anymore, and sort of really sort of built up. And I think the last few points really is to sort of reinforce the idea that if you do walk around the area, you sort of really will not want to call it Little India because of the diversity of religions. On the right hand side is the Buddhist Welfare Association. Of course, on the left is the Kampong Kapor Methodist Church. But there are also sort of precursors of different kinds of religions. Like for example, a tree. Probably you will recognize that this tree would be sort of wrapped with sacred yellow cloth. Then there are also sort of native indigenous sort of gods like the Datuk Kong, like the Tape Kong, and so on and so forth. Of course, you have the Abdul Ghaffar Mosque. But if you walk around and you see flags sticking out of a corner of this shop house, once again you sort of have a kind of a religious society that would actually be present. And of course some say that they are the ones who collect protection money around the area, but we don't know for sure. But what I'm showing you really is that even outside of the sort of official religions, and the place is really, really very interesting, and we've often set student projects to look at the place and to really interact with the people. Nasi Bawayan, I'm told that if you don't go there early enough, the food finishes by 11 a.m. And then on the right hand side is Lembu Square, which is of course the other area where foreign workers will gather. These would be from Bangladeshis, and I'm not sure if Bangladeshis would want to be known as Indians, as would Pakistanis and so on and so forth. But even within Lembu Square itself, it is quite complex, because you would be able to see different people from Dhaka forming a group, different people from out of town forming different groups. Some people will be, some groups will form because they play carom and so on and so forth. There's a corner for that. And so that's that kind of a diversity that you can find, and really not deserving of a quick impression that the term Little India would bring. The recycling industry, actually, the sort of this is actually quite prevalent in the area. The networks are actually quite broad. And there is a very specific group that transports electronics to the Indonesian, the Riau Islands, and of course, you can find all you want there, whatever you want to prepare. So sometimes as you walk along the streets, you will see Chinese text, Jik Bai Zhou with Tamil, I presume English, and so on and so forth. And even I always like to use this, and this is a word that more or less, you say it's Chinese, but actually it's Hokkien, Teochew. That's the word for kopi. It doesn't exist in any Chinese dictionary. But of course, there is a way to write it. So I think I started out with the tiger story. I'm wondering whether you noticed that even at that time it was not Indian. There were Malays, there were Chinese, there were Europeans, and so on and so forth. And I think in the context of Singapore, Little India, like Chinatown, really is kind of a tourism term. And I think for older kind of enclaves, I think we have sort of graduated in more ways than one into a kind of a more sort of multi-ethnic space than the kind of singular kind of ethnic space that exists. And really, we have to acknowledge that kind of diversity within that space, and perhaps we should find other ways to rethink about the area to really do justice to that space. Thank you.